Hello, hello, and welcome, beautiful people, to another Sunday, to another weekend service here at CSC. And we are excited to be here in this space where we celebrate the magnificence and significance of the presence and power of God operating in, through, and as us. Let us begin, as we always do, with the words of prayer. And I'm going to ground us in a reading today from the Daily Word. The word today is a wonderful word. It's joy. And the affirmation, I rejoice in life's simple pleasures. Life's biggest moments, weddings, births, graduations, celebrations of all kinds, are a cause for joy. But joy is also found in life's simpler moments, the day-to-day happenings that comprise daily living. Joy is in the sunrise, in my morning prayer, in the familiar faces I love and look forward to seeing, in the satisfaction I get from my work. It is in my favorite things and in the sweet surprises that come from trying something new and different. Joy is in the comfort I find in my favorite spiritual practices and in finding God anew as I deepen in spiritual insight. However it manifests, joy is part of me, a way to feel the peace and power of God in my heart and deep in my soul. And again, I rejoice in life's simple pleasures. And so from this place of awareness, I invite you to get still. If you are moving, get still. If you happen to be in your car, pull over. Let us all just take a moment. And I invite you now to just take a breath in and exhale. We deepen in mind and we breathe in. And we breathe out. Going deeper and deeper, we breathe in. And we breathe out. With joy today, I remember and recognize that there is only one mind, only one power, only one presence that is working in all, through all, and as all. There is one life. That life is God. That life is perfect, whole, and complete. That life is my life now. That life is your life now. That life is our life now. That life is all life now. This beautiful joy that I call God today is the life of every plant, every leaf, every root, every insect. It is the life of every galaxy, every planet known and unknown. It is the life of the entire universe. It is the life of every blade of grass, every grain of sand, every rock, every mountain, every sea, every river, every ocean, and all beings that inhabit the waters of this great planet and beyond. It is the life of all, and it is perfect, whole, and complete, undivided, perfect, whole, and complete. And as I recognize that it is, I recognize that it neither comes nor goes. I recognize that God, all of God, is always right here, right now. Omnipresence, constantly encountered, available, now, now, now. For I recognize that the space that you occupy and the space that we occupy is filled and overflowing with God. Filled and overflowing with the love that God is, strength, power, peace, ease, grace, abundance, prosperity, and well-being that God is, filled and overflowing right here and right now. This connection that connects us on this digital realm is filled and overflowing with God stuff right here and right now. And as I recognize that, I remember our oneness with God. I remember that we are individualized expressions of the creative force and the creative power of the divine. We are sacred. We are holy. We are undivided expressions of this good thing that we call God. And so it is out of this awareness that we celebrate today. It is out of this awareness that we gather today. It is out of this awareness that we unlearn anything that is unlike that truth. It is out of this awareness that we allow miracles. It is out of this awareness that we forgive. It is out of this awareness that we release and let go. It is out of this awareness that we live surrendered to the great power within us. It is out of this awareness that we declare that there is a power and presence within us that we call God, and it is good operating through us. It is out of this awareness that we co-create this experience we call the weekend service and know that it will be good, know that it will be a blessing, know that we will leave here differently than when we entered this space. And this is so. So from this place of awareness, I now release this prayer. I release it back into the law, which is always in operation, always responding to the pattern of thought that we give it. The thought that we have given it is creative. The thought that we have given it is blessed. The thought that we have given it is filled with optimism and absolute beautiful potential. So with joy and thanksgiving, we lift up our voices and we say, Amen.
Amen.
Ashe.
Ashe.
And so it is.
And so it is.
And so it is, and so it must be. Well, hello again. Happy Sunday. It is so very good to be here with you. I'm Pastor Greg.
I'm Pastor Yolanda.
And we are excited always to be here with our spiritual family, with our spiritual community, to lead Celebration Spiritual Center as we do and continue to grow together as a family, continue to expand as a family, continue to prosper as a family. If you are a first-time guest, hello, welcome. We're so grateful that something or someone brought you here today, and we are confident that something will be done, something will be said that will support you directly in your life experience, that will support you in thriving, that will support you in having an expanded awareness of God and an expanded awareness of yourself, so that you can live prosperously in any way you choose to. And now the information you see here on your screen is how you access your digital connection card. It's very easy to do. Just text the word welcome to 347-472-1078. Just the word welcome. No additional messages are needed. And you'll receive an automated response with a link that takes you to the digital connection card. Click that link into your name and your email, submit it, and you'll receive another text that says you're all set. Indeed, you are. At that point, you'll be on our mailing list. You'll receive all the correspondence we send out throughout the week. We send out a weekly newsletter that goes out on Fridays. And of course, if you happen to have questions, you can also respond to those emails or send us a message and let us know any questions you have, or let us know how much you're enjoying the services, whatever that looks like. Additionally, we would love for you to shout yourself out. You can let us know where you're connecting in from in the comments. You may already see there are folks connecting in from around the country, and you might find that there's someone in your city, state, or country that's connected right here and right now. But most importantly, we're excited that you're here, and we're excited about what you will receive and the path that you have placed yourself on as a result of being here today. So from this place, it's a wonderful opportunity for us to tap into our news and updates. Many of these things are reflected in our weekly newsletter, and of course you want to have those links close by, but we of course want to go through all of those updates for you so that you know what's happening, classes, and so many other things that are happening here at CSC. If you have a prayer request, you can send that prayer request to prayerchampions@celebrationsc.org. We are always knowing the truth with each and every one of you, holding the highest and best for each and every one of you, but we recognize you may have a specific prayer request. You may want to submit the name of a friend or a loved one as a prayer request, and that's all good. We welcome it. Send that to prayerchampions@celebrationsc.org, and we will pray with and for you and for them. And we encourage you that as your prayer is answered, you can send us an email to prayerchampions@celebrationsc.org as well to let us know how prayer is working in your life, to let us know about the miracles that are showing up in your life. It's wonderful to hear. We know that prayer works, and we love to hear how it's working in your life. Every Wednesday morning, we gather together for the Momentum Prayer Call. The Momentum Prayer Call is a wonderful way to continue the vibration that we create here on Sundays. It's also a wonderful way to jumpstart your day in the middle of the week. So we gather together, we share a reading, we pray, and we move on with our day. Now, for any number of reasons, this schedule might not work within your particular schedule, and so every prayer is recorded. You can use the playback number you see there on your screen. Call that number, enter the access code, and wait, and the most recent prayer will play. That's available 24/7. I am so excited because registration is open for the Affirmative Prayer Mastermind, and this is the last round for this year. This is a new class that we introduced this year, and it has been wonderful. Each and every round has been powerful. Each and every round has had answered prayers, and the vibration of prayer is still going even in the weeks after the class. If you want to tap into the vibration of prayer and learn a simple, time-tested, proven method to pray easily and effortlessly while also praying with others, the Affirmative Prayer Mastermind is for you. Again, it's only a 4-week class. We start on November 4th. One of the changes we're doing with this round, we previously held the class on Wednesdays this year. This round is going to be on Mondays. So I trust that this will actually work better for some schedules. I recognize for others it may not, but we are going to be holding the class on Monday, starting Monday, November 4th for 4 weeks. The cost is $97. You can scan the QR code to take you directly to the registration page, or you can go to celebrationsc.org/register to register for the class. Now is the time to start thinking about 2025. I shared this last week, and I'll continue to share this. I just call it the pumpkin patch principle, right? We recognize that we're in the month of October, and you just saw that beautiful graphic with all of those pumpkins. And we recognize that those farmers had to be intentional. They couldn't wait until September, and definitely not October, to begin to plant pumpkins if they wanted to have pumpkins available for people to come to the pumpkin patch and pick it. What we actually know to be true is that they usually plant those pumpkins around the springtime, near the end of spring. And so just as we understand that, it's practical, it's natural, it's logical. Why do we wait until December? Why do we wait sometimes until January, New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, to begin to plan and plot out our year? It must actually begin much earlier, because the goals and the desires and the dreams that you have are just like those seeds that the pumpkin farmer also has to plant. And so the Best Year Ever course is designed to support you in doing just that. To get really clear about your new year, get really clear about 2025, I take you through a beautiful process, vision, dream, nourish, and grow, to support you in doing that. We also use the text 30-Day Mental Diet by Willis Kinnear to support you in clearing out your mind and reminding you of what is absolutely true about yourself. And so the course is available now. It's available in the Multi-Manifestor app. You can also go to celebrationsc.org/register, and that'll take you directly to the registration page. The cost is only $97, and it includes 3 bonus Zoom sessions. So if and when you sign up this month, we have 1 session happening this month, 1 will happen in November, and 1 will happen in December, because I really want to support you all and make sure that any questions you have can be answered, and continue to keep you on the right track as we endeavor to prosper in 2025. Next Sunday is the 3rd Sunday, which means it is God Talk Sunday. The God Talk is your opportunity to ask questions. What we know to be true is that this spiritual path, as we move on this new thought, metaphysical path, you're going to have lots of questions, and you're really going to be doing a lot of unlearning. And so what the God Talk supports you in doing is walking that path. The date. I'm sorry, we have the date. The date is wrong. Right, today's the 1st Sunday of the month, right?
Yep.
So I'm sorry, the 3rd Sunday,
Is
the
the
20th.
20th?
All right, so we'll update that graphic. The 3rd Sunday is God Talk Sunday, so that's the 20th. What we know to be true is that you have, there's a lot of unlearning that happens and is necessary as you're walking this path. And so the God Talk is your opportunity to ask questions. The God Talk is your opportunity to get clarity. And what I was saying was Pastor Yolanda and I have walked that path, right? We've walked that path of having a lot of questions. And one of the things that we knew as we founded Celebration Spiritual Center is that we wanted to be the ones that will support folks in walking across that bridge. And it doesn't have to be a long 7-year journey as it was for us. And so that's what the God Talk is all about. We look forward to you all being with us. Again, 3rd Sunday. Because I said 3rd Sunday, but the date is incorrect there. The 20th is the 3rd Sunday we'll gather together for the God Talk. Our series of the month this month is an important series because it really supports us in our October 2024 series. And so in March 2016 is where I first introduced the Reimagine the Bible series. This is part 1. That's focused on the First Testament or the Old Testament. And so you can access this on our YouTube channel now, on the homepage of our YouTube channel. And this is important because it offers some very foundational teachings as it relates to looking and using the Bible in general general, but specifically the First Testament. You'll also find part 2 is available there with the Second Testament. And so we encourage you to go back. I'm going to refer to some pieces from one of these sermons in today's sermon, but again, it's really good for you to go back and check out those sermons as we break down so many wonderful things about the First Testament and the Second Testament. We are quickly approaching election season. We are now less than a month away of the end of election season. I'm hearing a few people frame it that way, and I think it's important, right? That election day is actually the end of the season. Millions of people have already voted via absentee balloting, and so and early voting will be starting soon. So we're in this space and place. There's a lot going on in the news cycle, and we recognize that what we focus on expands, and what we focus on then creates the emotional current within our own bodies, right, and causes us to respond to life in a certain way. And so we want to tune out the fear and tune in the vision. And so I encourage you to join me and other thought leaders as we have been supporting folks around the country and around the world as they are listening to these messages. Just you can text the number there on your screen or go to myelectionintention.com. You'll receive a short message from one of us each day focused on a different word. Again, it has been powerful, really helpful and beautiful. And so we encourage you to continue to use this resource and continue to keep the focus of your attention on the world that you want. We are, of course, also encouraging everyone to register to vote. And if you are already registered, check and double check your registration. We know that voter rolls are being purged around the country. We know that there are just people who think they're registered, but they moved and forgot, right? There's so many just practical things. It doesn't have to be malicious, but make sure that you double check your registration. Make sure that you double check your polling place. And you can go to vote.org to do that. Finally, as we talk about registration, there are many states that registration, the deadline is happening today. We have states like Alaska. Today is the last day to register. And we have tomorrow a host of states like Arizona, I believe,
Arkansas.
one or more of the Carolinas, South Carolina by mail, right? So we recognize, I think Georgia's in that list as well. 10-7 for Georgia. So this is important, particularly if you reside in any of these states. It is also important, as you know folks in these states, to let them know that, hey, the deadline is happening. Talk to your people, remind folks, check in, make sure folks are registered to vote, and then, of course, have a plan to vote, ideally early if it's available, and so that we don't have any troubles or any issues. We encourage you, as always, to subscribe, like, and share. You can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and, of course, here on YouTube as well. Definitely, if you haven't already subscribed to our YouTube channel, we encourage you to as we continue to share more things throughout the week. And, of course, like and share those things. Let people know what you're all about. And, of course, let folks know that CSC is here and what CSC is all about. And that concludes our news and updates for this Sunday, which means we have the wonderful opportunity to go within as we are led in the meditation experience with Pastor Yolanda.
Yes. It is time for the meditation experience. It's an integral part of what we do here at CSC is we provide the opportunity to go within. And as I like to say, you can study all the sacred texts that you want, and we do. But it is only through your direct experience of the God within you that you know the things you're reading are true. Many people can recite all of these texts. They know them line by line, but are they living them? And you can tell by the way they respond to life and the way they live their lives and the way they interact with others in their lives. We want to do more than provide information. We want you to know that the things you read are true. And so We call it the meditation experience for that reason. It's not a challenge to meditate. It is a direct experience of the God within you that you're after. It is a confirmation of your connection to it that you are after. It is an experience of love and peace and ease that you get to individually know and understand. And so we take time every Sunday to do that, to go within, to focus ourselves on releasing the things that keep us from knowing the truth. And we affirm a thought that is true, or a thought that we want to receive or accept. And so this month's affirmative thought is divine peace and harmony surround me. Divine peace and harmony surround me. I don't have to go looking for it. I just accept it as here, now. This peace that flows on the breath, the beating of my heart, symbolizes and harmonizes how I flow through life. And so divine peace is not out there. It is right here. It is the thing that surrounds, loves, supports, holds, and sends and guides me in the direction of my good. I'm not worried about the external. I know what surrounds me. It is not disharmony and dis-ease. It is surrounding me, loving me, knowing me, and guiding me. So let's do that today. Let's experience some divine peace. It's that simple. So what we're going to do is prepare. Plant the palms on the tops of the thighs. And look around the room, because I want you to be very present, because that's where the peace is, actually. I want you to be aware of where your mind goes, and I want you to lovingly bring it back to our affirmative thought. Divine peace and harmony surround me. And as you look around the room, you notice where you are, you become present, and you realize that you're safe right where you are. And so we allow our eyelids to close gently, easily, and in divine peace and harmony. And let's just notice what life feels like on the inside. As we close our eyes, we signal the breath to become more active, but we signal the breath to become more relaxed. And let's just take a few moments to notice the breath right where it is. And whether the breath appears to be deep or appears to be shallow, we make no judgment of the breath. We just honor that it is moving. And the same energy that is moving on the breath is the same energy that is surrounding us in divine peace and harmony. Now let's take conscious control of the breath. And let's send that breath and the focus of our attention into the low belly, so that we begin to activate the deepest, most peaceful breath we can. So together, we're going to inhale for a count of 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4, and then allow the peace to surround us for 4. So let's begin. Inhale. And hold the breath for 4. And relax the jaw. Sigh out anything that would keep you from your peace for 4. And let the peace envelop you. Again, in through the low belly, dropping that breath nice and low. Hold for 4. And when you're ready, relax the jaw, sigh it out. Let the sound be released, and let anything that is out of balance with divine peace go now. And settle into the peace. In through the low belly, now up through the rib cage, allowing the breath to rise, connecting low breath to mid breath. So we expand the sides of our body, holding for 4. Relax the jaw and sigh it out. And welcome the silence. In through the low belly, up through the rib cage, expanding the sides, and now the front and the back of the body, just filling up with breath. Hold it there. And sigh it out. And welcome the peace. In through the low belly, up through the rib cage, allowing the breath to rise to the heart chakra. So we're connecting low to mid to high breath. A full, complete breath. Hold it there. And without collapsing the body, release the breath. Sigh it out. Allow the peace to surround you. Again, in through the low belly, up through the rib cage, allowing the breath to rise to the heart chakra, center of the chest. Allowing that breath to flow across the chest, across the back, and hold it there. And whatever you're holding that is unlike peace and harmony, release it now. And welcome the silence. Each round of deep breath gives a signal to our body to relax even more. So let's practice that by slowing it down even more. So we're going to inhale for a count of 6, hold for 6, exhale for 6, and welcome the peace for 6. Breathing in and out. Together, in through the nostrils. Hold the breath. But this time, close the lips and exhale through the nostrils. And rest. Let's take a few rounds of that deep breath. The more you breathe deeply, the more relaxation you send throughout the body. And the more the mind comes to welcome the peace as well. Last round here. Beautiful, everyone. Now let's send this peace into our feet. Maybe you notice there's some tension in the feet. Send the breath there. Relax the feet. Energy flowing up through the soles of the feet, across the ankles. Relax the ankles. We give ourselves permission for the energy to rise and the peace to fill us and surround us. Go ahead and relax the shins and the calves. Allow the energy to flow across the knees. Allow yourself to relax the knees now. Unobstructed, the energy flows across the thighs and the glutes and the hamstrings. Give yourself permission. Relax the thighs, the glutes, the hamstrings. And just go ahead and relax the lower half of your body into the seat where you are, letting it support you and letting divine peace and harmony surround you. As we breathe in and we exhale and allow, that energy flows in and up. Exhale through the nostrils when you're ready and allow. And the energy flows in and up. Exhale and allow. And up the energy flows. And up and out the crown of the head. We are a beacon of light, and we allow the divine peace and harmony to flow and surround us. Let that energy flow back down through the crown, across the third eye, down the throat, across the shoulders. If you notice any tensions, go ahead and relax there. Down the arms and out the fingertips. As we prepare for our silent time, just scan your body. Notice if there's anywhere that you feel you're holding. Resisting, allowing divine peace and harmony. Without judgment, just let it all go. I will monitor the time. You take the inward journey. But if the mind wanders, it's okay. The mind is just doing what it does. When we become aware that our mind has taken us away from this moment, we bring it back to our affirmative thought. Divine peace and harmony surround me. Divine peace and harmony surround you. Divine peace and harmony surrounds us now. With our eyelids still closed, we may have noticed how the silence, it comes, it brings the peace and the harmony. With our eyelids closed, we remember how good it feels right now on the inside. And we take that feeling with us throughout our week. There are all kinds of sights and sounds and thoughts and things that can interfere if we allow it. But when we feel disturbance anywhere in our bodies or our lives, we bring ourselves back to our affirmative thought. We close our eyelids and we breathe in the words of truth. Divine peace and harmony surrounds me. I don't have to beg for it or be more worthy of it. It just envelops and surrounds me. I take this peace and this feeling of comfort with me into my week. Let's begin to make our way back now. If the palms are turned up, turn them down. And let's inhale together, drawing our shoulders up by our ears. Taking a full breath as we release the shoulder blades and the breath back and down. Inhale, drawing the shoulders up by the ears. Exhale, releasing the shoulder blades back and down. Nice and easy, no strain here. Inhale up. Full breath, exhale, releasing the shoulder blades back and down. Bringing the palms together at heart center and bowing the chin towards the fingertips if you are able. Noticing that even in the smallest movements, the peace remains. Allow the eyelids to gently open. Again, no strain here. Inhale, raise the chin, raise the gaze. Exhale, release the breath. Maintain the peace. Namaste.
Yes, yes. Maintain the peace. Thank you, PY.
You're welcome.
Well, it is a new month, which means we start a new series. And as you all know, our series this month is God Trauma, Lessons from the Book of Job. Now, this is not actually a series that I wanted to teach, and PY can tell you, we've talked about this for a while, right? She would ask me, and people have asked me over many, many years, if I had taught a series on the Book of Job and if I would. And I had a completely different series planned for this month. But as we were moving through the month of September and so many different things were happening, right? There's so many things related to the election, of course, that is happening. When we hear what's been happening in Springfield, Ohio, and the Haitian community and immigrants in general, right? You have that. Then we have the hurricanes that have been happening this season, and like clockwork, there are those that have said that hurricanes are an act of God and an act of punishment. That is, unfortunately, people are still saying that. Ministers, pastors, teachers. Spiritual teachers. And then we have the execution of Marcellus Williams recently, and then even more recently now in Oklahoma, the state superintendent of Oklahoma is requesting Bibles for the schools, and he says that it must be the King James Version, and they must include copies of the Declaration of Independence, and I think the Star Spangled Banner, Pledge of Allegiance. It's just, it upsets me. So what it brings up for me is a couple things: that the Bible is still being misused and weaponized,
Absolutely.
and we need to address that. And then also, there's an incredible amount of suffering happening on our planet, when we look at the Palestinian people, when we look at the Sudanese people, when we look at the floods and things that are happening in Nigeria, and on, there's an incredible amount of suffering, and we need to speak to that. And the book of Job can actually support us in doing that when we understand it. At the same time as I unpack the book of Job, we're also healing your Bible stories, right? We're healing that thing that is happening within our communities and culture that continues to misuse, misinform, and also weaponize the Bible and weaponize Scripture. And so we're going to touch on a host of things as a result of this series. And again, I trust it'll meet you right where you are. But before we get into today's sermon, we're going to hear from Soul 21, and then I'll be with you on the other side with today's sermon, Job's Trauma.
When my way seems dark,
My way seems dark,
and I cannot see,
and I cannot see.
I remember that you
Remember that you
are guiding me.
are guiding me
When I want to fear,
when I want to fear,
to run and
to
hide,
run and hide.
I just look to the source
I just look
of all
to
life.
the source of life.
I give this to you.
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 You know the answers.
You know the answer.
You know what to do.
You know what to do.
I give this to you.
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 You know the answers.
You know the answers.
You know what to do.
You know what to do.
When I get upset,
When I get upset,
when I'm feeling small,
when I'm feeling small,
when I forget
when I forget
that I'm safe and strong.
that I'm safe and strong,
Oh God, lovingly,
loving me,
you always remind me
you remind me
that I don't have to hold this
that
anymore.
I don't have to hold this anymore.
So what do? I give this to you.
Give this to you.
I give this to the
I give this to you.
You know the answers.
You know the answer.
You know what to do.
You know what to do.
I give this to you. I give this to you.
I give this to you.
Oh God, you know the answers.
You know the answer.
You know what to do.
You know what to do.
Oh, worry, doubt, and fear.
Worry, doubt, and fear.
I give it up.
I give it up.
we can allow to work through us when we release it. When we release it. But we gotta release the worry. We've gotta release the doubt. We've gotta release the fear. Why? Because it was never yours to begin with. But when we're in that space, we're acting like it belongs to us. But we're gonna let it go. We're gonna let it go. I wanna sing that part again. Worry, doubt, and fear. Give it up.
like you have the opportunity to free yourself of that thing right now. You have the opportunity to free yourself of that worry right now, of that concern right now, of that I don't know how I'm going to make it right now, that what's going to happen tomorrow right now, that what's going to happen at the end of the month right now. You have the opportunity to let it all, let it all. You know what to do. So it is. So it is.
My. Yes, I give this to you. You know the answers. You know what to do. There is a power and a presence within us that is greater than our circumstances and greater than our experiences. There is something within us that always knows, and we have the opportunity to surrender to it. We have the opportunity to rest in it. We have the opportunity to rely upon it. Well, hello, beautiful people. Happy Sunday. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it is where you are, it is good. We have a lot to unpack on this first Sunday in October, the first message for this series. And so first, I want to just support you in just grounding yourself with the centering prayer. And so I invite you to just repeat after me. I welcome the Spirit of truth into my mind and let it grow in my heart. Thank you, God, in me, through me, and as me. Amen. Ashe. And so it is. And so it is. Well, I've already given you a little bit of an understanding of what brought us to this sermon series. Again, this is not the series I intended to preach this month, and to that end, we're definitely going to go through the month. This might take us into next month because there's so much rich and beautiful things to unpack. But I want to start with a story. I was remembering and thinking about my 9/11 story. Now, in 2001, on 9/11, I was still living in New Jersey. I was living in Jersey City. And Jersey City is just right across the river. I would take the PATH train every day to the World Trade Center, and then would take the subway uptown to where I worked at Mount Sinai Hospital, Mount Sinai School of Medicine. And so that's what I did, as I normally do every day. And so many people talk about it. It's just true. It was a beautiful, perfect weather day, September weather day. I can still remember how beautiful the sky was. I can still remember how wonderful the weather was that day. And I did what I normally do. Got up, got on the PATH train, walked into what would be my last time walking in the World Trade Center. I did not know it. There's a Krispy Kreme, or used to be a Krispy Kreme at World Trade Center. And I remember I had walked down into the concourse and stopped because I was like, I should maybe get Krispy Kreme, maybe bring some to the office. And I stopped, I turned around, I looked at the Krispy Kreme, I looked up at the towers, and I said, nah, I'll just get some breakfast when I get uptown. Again, I did not know that I was looking at the towers for the last time. I did not know there was something on some level that maybe understood that that would be my last view. And so I got uptown, got my breakfast, was at my desk, and I ended up missing the first plane by about 30 minutes. And where my office was, the floor that I was on, we were really high up. And so from the lobby, we had a direct view downtown. And I still remember looking at that view, and you could see the smoke billowing out of the first tower. still not knowing all of what had happened and what was going on, and of course knowing that something had happened at the World Trade Center before. So we definitely weren't thinking that it was at the level that it would be and that it would become. Now, at this point, I had completed my first year of my seminary program at New York Theological Seminary, and my perspective on the Bible had already become radically altered. Studying liberation theology, I was now firmly grounded in the idea that God is on the side of the oppressed, that God is with the small ones, that God is with the marginalized. And I remember looking forward to going to church on that Sunday. I went to church expecting to hear a sermon that would speak directly to the times, a sermon that would address American imperialism, that would offer an alternative to the calls for war that were happening. And I'm laughing now because that was very naive, considering the church that I went to. And of course, I heard none of that. 2 members of our church were in the towers and died that day. One I knew pretty well. The other one I only knew in passing. And so we're also a community, a larger, wider community in mourning, but directly our church community, we lost 2 of our members. And the only response that I heard that day via the sermon was essentially a God is still in control message. It was a God's ways are past finding out message. It was a we'll understand it better by and by. In fact, that's even the song that was sung. This was like the climax of the sermon. At the end of the sermon that Sunday, by and by, when the morning comes, all the saints of God will gather home. We'll tell the story of how we overcome, and we'll understand it better by and by. And we had 3 services at the church that I attended each Sunday. And so I actually attended the 2nd and 3rd service that Sunday. And each service, the folks just ate it up, dancing and praising and clapping when the song came on. And it was like, yes, this makes it all make sense. In the midst of something that had never taken place on American soil, in the midst of unimaginable suffering, in the midst of 3,000 people ultimately losing their lives in the World Trade Center and those on the other planes and the Pentagon, and all of the fear and uncertainty that's followed those times, we'll understand it better by and by. was what was being sung. And so I sat there as everyone else was up clapping and dancing and praising. I sat there disappointed. As people were running up and down the aisles and doing all of the things, I was frustrated as I observed the folly of that moment. Needless to say, it wasn't long that I no longer attended that church. That was actually one of the last Sundays that I attended services there. The next Sunday that I attended was after my daughter Malcolm was born, because she was born just a few months later in December. And in January, I took her to church because there were folks that wanted to see her and meet her, and that was the last time that I ever attended service there. And so I share this story because it speaks to our times in the sense of there's unimaginable suffering happening on the planet, and there's some very empty words and responses from religious communities. There's the weaponization of Scripture, as I talked about earlier, or just the misuse and the misinformation of Scripture. And that moment that I experienced, it echoes for me what Job experiences in the meeting with his friends after experiencing unimaginable suffering. His friends, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar, have responses that don't acknowledge his suffering. They have responses that don't acknowledge his trauma. They have responses that don't recognize the injustice of the moment. And for me, it represents just one of the traumatizing ways that religion and spirituality are misused when confronted with previously unimaginable suffering. And I want to say this, because I said religion and suffering. This is not an anti-Christian message. This is not about calling out Christianity, because I got news for you right here and now. New Thought folks are doing the same mess and have been doing the same type of things, using these teachings, using the words of Ernest Holmes and others to make people feel guilty, using these words to shame people, using these words to bury their head in the sands and not acknowledge injustice, using these same words, and they're not trauma informed. But this month, as we look at Job, we will use a trauma-informed and trauma-sensitive approach to reading the text. This will be our lens. This will be our hermeneutic. Hermeneutic is a theological term which simply means it's like a pair of glasses. And so if I put on glasses with a red tint, I would see everything would be red. And if I put glasses on with a yellow tint, everything would be yellow. Right? And so what we get to do with a different hermeneutic, when we put on a certain lens, then we can glean things from the text. We can surface things from the text that we may not have seen if we had on a different pair of glasses. And so I think it's incredibly important when we're reading the biblical text that we do read it with a trauma-informed and trauma-sensitive approach. This is why you can go back, it's on YouTube, when you look at the sermon that I gave on the massacre at Jericho. Well, see, that was a trauma-informed and trauma-sensitive approach to the reading of the text, recognizing that there's nothing good about what happened at Jericho. And what I said in that message, we can no longer talk about God has given me my Jericho or using that as some metaphor for a spiritual conquering in your own life, because it was a massacre. It was a massacre just as we think about Black Wall Street in this country. It's no different. But if you don't have a trauma-informed lens, if you don't have a lens of understanding that God is on the side of the oppressed, the least of these, you're not even understanding that, wait a minute, that God told Joshua and his people to go and rape and pillage an existing land and an existing community, and that's supposed to be celebrated. And so having a trauma-informed and trauma-sensitive approach, I want to use trauma as defined by Dr. Gabor S. Mate. You all know, of course, he is someone who I love to learn from and read from. And when he talks about trauma, he says this. First of all, trauma comes from the Greek. That word, our English word trauma, comes from the Greek, and it simply means wound. And he goes on, he says, trauma, as it is a wound, is not what happens to you. It is what happens inside of you as a result of what happens to you. It's not the blow on the head, but the concussion I get. He goes on and he always says that that's good news, because then that means that we can actually heal trauma. If my trauma was that my mother gave me to a stranger, that will never not have happened, right? You hear that? That's a fact. Your mother gave you to a stranger, and if that's the trauma, you can't change that. But if the wound was that I decided as a result of that, I wasn't worthwhile as a human being, I wasn't lovable, that's a wound that can heal at any time. And so then what we understand is that when we're looking at trauma and we have a trauma-informed approach to reading the text, as we are metaphysicians, we then understand that what we're talking about is something that's happening internally. I'm hearing our dear Dr. Will Coleman, who talks about the burning bush experience of Moses. And he says that the bush wasn't consumed because the whole experience was taking place in his mind. And so we understand that this wound is actually something that's happening within, and not just the factual experience. So this is very important then to understanding that we must hold this as we're reading the text like Job, because what we are actually encountering is Job's trauma. A biblical scholar who it informs much of my thinking on this, Norman C. Habel, he writes this. He says, when we think about Job's trauma, there are three things that we actually encounter. And just reading these alone, these are things that you may have never even considered. One, we're encountering the extreme pain experienced when there seems to be no reason to stay alive, and when death at birth or even suicide is an inviting alternative. Job's trauma. Two, the bitterness of experiencing the betrayal of friends who assume guilt as the reason for suffering and reject any appeal to accept the word of the sufferer. And 3, the frightening angst of the believer who has an acute sense that God relishes terrorizing them as if they were one of the wicked. And this trauma that is Job's trauma is something that we're going to be unpacking over the weeks and coming back to and digging a little deeper into each week, because there's so much there, right? And I'm doing my best not to get ahead of myself. So first, I want to talk about the story, the basics of the story, because I'm sure many of you have actually read the biblical text. I'm sure that almost all of you are familiar with the basics of the story. But I don't want to assume that is true for everyone, and it's important that we kind of read through the beginning of this text, chapter 1 and 2, which is the baseline that sets us up for everything else, because there's some beautiful things that we can start to uncover in this first week. So in chapter 1 and 2, and I'm always reading from the New Revised Standard Version unless I share otherwise, we're introduced, the writer and the narrator introduce us to this man from the land of Uz named Job. And according to the text, it says he was blameless and upright. According to the text, it says he feared God and turned away from evil. Right? And it talks about he was so pious and so good that he was worried that his children would have, these wonderful feasts and festivals. And he was so worried that they might be committing some type of sin that he would go and make a sacrifice on their behalf to make sure that they were good with God. Because that's just the type of person that he was, according to the story. Blameless and upright, feared God and turned away from evil. I mentioned his children. He had 7 sons and 3 daughters. And he was wealthy. In the text we read, he had 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, 500 donkeys, and very many servants, so that this man was the greatest of all the people of the East. Now, this is something interesting, right? When we read this, and I'm hearing my seminary professor, he would say often to us, like, when we're reading this story, we have to understand that sometimes we read these things, 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels. It sounds so impossible, it feels improbable. And that's because this is an origin story. It's an epic story. It's a story that's been told and told and told and told over so many years. And so it just gets bigger and bigger. It's like a tall tale. Now, we recognize in American fiction and American lore that a tall tale, whether it's Paul Bunyan or John Henry or Johnny Appleseed, we recognize that there was a reason for the story, right? We were learning something. There was a lesson that was coming out of the story. And so whether it was fantastic or not, right? We don't know how strong John Henry really was, and if John Henry did everything that we learned in those stories as we read the tall tales. We knew and learned the lesson that was coming through the story. So when we hear this, 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, 500 donkeys, and very many servants, so that he was the greatest of all the people in the East, that's an elevated narrative, right? But it supports us in understanding who this person Job was. And again, then it goes on and it talks about that idea, as I just shared, where his sons would hold these feasts, and the daughters, they would hold these feasts, and he was so concerned that he would offer burnt offerings early in the morning on behalf of his children, and saying, it may be that my children have sinned and cursed God in their hearts. And this is what Job always did. So this was to exemplify the type of person that he was. And so then we get to this next part of the story. I'm now reading from Job 1, 6 through 12. One day, the heavenly beings came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them. The Lord said to Satan, "Where have you come from?" Satan answered the Lord, "From going to and fro on the earth, and from walking up and down on it." The Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job?" And remember, we were just introduced to this character named Job. And so now the Lord is saying, have you checked out Job? If you were walking to and fro around the earth, you had to know about my man, know about my servant Job. He says, there is no one like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man who fears God and turns away from evil. Then Satan answered the Lord, Does Job fear God for nothing? Have you not put a fence around him and his house and all that he has on every side? You have blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the land. But stretch out your hand now and touch all that he has, and he will curse you to your face. So what Satan is saying is like, come on, man. You talk about this guy named Job, and he's so perfect and blameless, but you're the one that set him up. You're the one that gave him all these things and protected him so that nothing can harm him, and so he can just prosper and prosper and prosper. Pull that fence from around his house, and I bet you he'll be attacked. The Lord said to Satan, very well, all that he has is in your power, only do not stretch out your hand against him. So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord. And so what happens after this moment? All of Job's sons and daughters are killed. 7 sons, 3 daughters. And he lost all of his wealth, all of his sheep, all of the donkeys, all of the camels, and the oxen. And to this calamity, to this unimaginable suffering, Job responds in this way. The text says, then Job arose, tore his robe, shaved his head, and fell on the ground and worshipped. He said, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked shall I return there. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. And then the narrator says, in all this, Job did not sin or charge God with wrongdoing. Now, this response from Job is a very familiar response, right? Because in the midst of this, there are those right now who are experiencing the unimaginable suffering after Hurricane Helene, and they're trying to reconcile this all that has happened and this great loss. And some of them are saying the Lord gives and the Lord takes away. Some of them are sitting in Sunday morning services in the same way that I was looking for a word on that Sunday after experiencing the suffering of 9/11 and having dreams in that week about digging out of the rubble. Only to hear we'll understand it gets better by and by. We'll understand it better by and by. They are hearing from their ministers and from their teachers, oh, well, you know, Job, the Lord gives and the Lord takes away. And so the story goes on because essentially, as Job did not sin or charge God with wrongdoing, Satan and the Lord have another conversation. And what Satan believes is that Job still got off easy. And essentially what he says to the Lord is like, okay, you can take away somebody's material things. And there are a lot of people like you and others that we've seen throughout time that material possessions are taken away. And even, because we're talking about unimaginable suffering, we're talking about the loss of children. This is something that I've heard from parents who have lost children. It is something that you essentially never really get over. It's similarly with the loss of a parent. And that's what he's dealing with. But Satan is saying that even with all of those things, that's one thing. But if Job's health and physical well-being is affected, I am confident that he will curse you. That's what Satan is saying to the Lord. And so, as in the first encounter, the Lord responds by saying this, very well, he is in your power, only spare his life. The Lord is saying, do whatever you want to this man short of killing him. In my reading, that's called torture, right? That's what criminals do, right? We've watched all kinds of stories and, of course, no real life accounts. That's what torture is. Do everything short of killing the person. And so Job was afflicted with a disease that, according to the text, caused sores from the top of his head to the soles of his feet. And as we read the text, it says that Job sat in a pile of ashes and took a broken piece of pottery and was using it to scrape his sores, which I imagine was somehow soothing in the midst of all of the pain that he was in. And at this point, we meet his wife. And his wife is unnamed, which this is a sad consistency that we find throughout Scripture. Women are often abused, misused, and of course, generally misinterpreted. But also we find that so many of the women in the biblical text are unnamed. And it's at this point, we read this in chapter 2, 9 through 10. Then his wife said to him, "Do you still persist in your integrity? Curse God and die." But he said to her, "You speak as any foolish woman would speak. Shall we receive the good at the hand of God and not receive the bad?" And the narrator goes on, "In all this, Job did not sin with his lips." Now, I promise you, I'm going to deal with, there's so much that's problematic in that text. I'm going to deal with that. My womanist lens can't let that go. We're going to get to that a little later, y'all. So just, if that pissed you off, good, because we're going to deal with it. And so it is after this that then we meet Job's friends. And we're going to cover that in the subsequent weeks because each of his friends represents a certain type of thinking that we're going to critique and look at in deeper ways. So I want to ground us a little bit now that we have this story, and I've put some things in there for you to consider. As I read and reread the opening of this story, it pisses me off. And it makes me angry for a few reasons. This is just a few. One, I can't help but think of all the bad theology and God concepts that have come from a misinformed reading of this story. Because for a host of people on this planet right now, including pastors and preachers and teachers, this is how God operates. That God is the source of our good and the source of our bad. I mean, that's what the story is saying, right? That God said to Satan, yeah, actually, Satan, you can torture him. Do everything you want short of killing him. That God is the source of good and also the source of bad because God removed the hedge of protection from around him, the fence from around him, and killed his old home family and took away his entire livelihood in a matter of moments. I can't help but think of all the people who have shamed themselves or were made to feel guilty because they did not respond to unimaginable suffering in the same way that Job does. I'm reminded of a story that Allen Iverson tells when he was arrested and targeted and spent time in jail. And he tells the story. He said he asked his grandmother, why would God allow this to happen? And his grandmother's response was, "Don't question God." And so even the fact that he would question God, I mean, there was something wrong with him, but he was experiencing an injustice. He was being targeted. And naturally, he would ask this question out of his own trauma, out of his own suffering, but he was told, "Don't question God." How many people have been told, "Don't question God"? How many people have been offered an idea that you should act like Job? Doesn't matter what happens to you. All your kids, all 10 of them can be murdered, killed right away. Doesn't matter. Your entire livelihood, your whole bank account could be drained overnight by some hackers. The Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away. That's the position that you're supposed to take. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Meanwhile, that Lord sold you out. Lord have mercy. That's the other thing that I'm mad about. I'm mad at this text because Job is honoring a God that sold him out to Satan. Now see, as the reader, we're privy to what happened. Job is just having the experience. This is one of the things why I love these literary techniques. That as the reader of the story, we have more information that the characters don't have. And that's by design, to evoke emotion and invoke certain thought. And so Job is sitting up there talking about, blessed be the name of the Lord. Blessed be the name of this cat that just sold him out. Acknowledging this, it is important that we ground the text. And there are clues in the passages that I read which answer some very important questions that need to be answered before we can actually gain any wisdom from the text. Because the thing about the biblical text and any of the texts or the writings that we read, we first have to just ground it in a series of questions to even understand if it speaks to our times or not. If it's even worth our time or not. And I've said it many times. This is why there's certain passages of scripture that nobody talks about, nobody reads. You don't hear it in any services or sermons because it's irrelevant to now. It may have been relevant to the time and to the people that it was written for, but it does not speak to our time and the realities of our world. But the truth is, we can gain wisdom from the text. And so as we ground it in some important questions, then and only then can we properly hear Job and understand Job's trauma. And so some of these questions, and these are questions I invite you all, whenever you're reading a biblical text, these are questions that you want to answer, actually probably before you read the text, but kind of center these as you're reading the text. One, when was Job written? Who is the writer and the narrator of the story? Who is the audience for the story? Who was this story written for? Why was this story written? Who is Job? Who does Job represent? Who is the Lord, as written in the story, and who is Satan? So one of the reasons that I wanted us to use Reimagine the Bible Part 1 as our series, our throwback series of the month, is because there's some important things that I shared, particularly in that first sermon, What's in Your Bible? And I talk about these fundamental, foundational understandings that are important, that the Bible is a compilation of various books and writings. The Bible is not a unified text that you can read from beginning to end. PY and I have this conversation all the time. I always get concerned when anybody tells me, oh yeah, I'm reading the Bible, or yeah, I just read the Bible. I get concerned because the Bible is not like the reading Harry Potter, right? I read the Harry Potter series. That's not what it is. It is a compilation of various books and writings, right? So it'd be interesting. You could, say I read Job, right? That would be like saying I just read The Fire Next Time by James Baldwin, right? I read All About Love by Bell Hooks, right? I read Beloved, right? That's what that would be akin to. So that's important. And so first with the Bible, we have the Torah, which is the 5 books of Moses, or the Pentateuch, right? That's Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. That's a singular whole, right? That is the Torah, which is the sacred text of the Jewish religion, right? Then you have the historical books. Those would be texts like Joshua, 1 Kings, 2 Kings, 1 and 2 Samuel. Now, we got to be careful, because when we call them the historical books, and I break this down in the Jericho sermon, also the sermon Loving Jezebel, that we have to understand that the historical texts that are canonized in the Bible had a specific point of view. They were written for a certain reason. It's the same way as we're dealing with now with the so-called problem of DEI, as we're dealing with the so-called problems of critical race theory, and how we have governments that are seeking to erase history, or that are seeking to talk about history in different ways. For instance, we have history books that would that actually teach that enslaved Africans were happy and peaceful and enjoyed their circumstances, right? And so it's called a history book, but we know that's not actual history, right? It's actually fabrications. So we must be clear that the historical books in the canonized text were written for a specific reason. You can actually look in the text in Kings, the writer in Kings, he says several times, are not those things written in the book of the annals of the kings? In other words, he's like, the history is contained in another book. What I'm giving you is the mythologizing of these kings and of these different reigns of power to a specific end. It's the same way here in America, where we have the stories, mythology of George Washington and the I Cannot Tell a Lie and the Cherry Tree. Same thought process, right? Humans have been doing this for a very long time. Then you have the wisdom books, or the writings, and that's what we're in now. Job is part of the writings, one of the wisdom texts. Psalms, Proverbs, Song of Solomon. These are wisdom texts. These are part of the writings, and that's important. You heard me use the term earlier when I said the writer and the narrator uses a specific literary technique. And I use that term specifically because this is what the book of Job is. I'm sure many of you, like me, you studied the Odyssey, by Homer in high school or in college, or maybe the Iliad, right? And we've learned about these epic poems, this epic poetry that has great meaning and takes you on this journey and has a purpose outside of a literal reading of the text, and has a purpose that's not trying to teach us about some historical figure named Job. This is what the book of Job is doing, and what the writings are all about. Then we have the major prophets and the minor prophets. And the difference in major and minor has nothing to do with one was better, one set of prophets are better than the other. It just simply points to the length of their work or the length of their service as a prophet. So, of course, Isaiah would be a major prophet, and Jonah is considered a minor prophet, right? Because if you know the story of Jonah, it was kind of one episode, okay? And so it's important to know that as these books were written and these texts were written, they were never written with the intention to be a whole text, a whole book. This is why beautifully within the Jewish tradition, we have the scrolls, right? So you get the Psalm scroll, you get the Job scroll, right? You don't have the same type of canonization that leads us to think that this is a unified text. The other thing I shared in that sermon, and this is very important as it relates to the book of Job, is that there are 4 distinct voices or schools of thought in the First Testament or the Old Testament. And this is based on the source theory. There's an acronym JEPD: Yahwist, Elohist, Priestly, and Deuteronomist. And so one of the reasons that reading Old Testament can be very confusing is that at face value, particularly in the English translations, it's hard to know which voice or which source you're reading from. And in fact, sometimes in the same chapter, sometimes within a couple of sentences of each other, you got words coming from the Yahweh source and then words coming from the priestly source, and then followed by the Deuteronomist source. And this is because all of the different scrolls were compiled over time after the separate kingdoms and after the exile. And so you have these different voices and different ways of thinking. And this is why you can read about a king, and 1 minute it's saying that God loved and honored the king, and the king honored God. And then the next minute they're saying that this king was evil and didn't honor God. And it's confusing to understand, well, how could that be so quickly? Except we recognize that there are different voices that are writing and talking. And again, our compilation and the canonization and the final text that we have today doesn't reveal what's behind it. And so this is also then why reading the text and having access to the text in Hebrew and being able to use Hebrew, English dictionary, etc., and looking at the words, you can start to understand that. So if you've read some of those historical books that I talked about, again, Joshua, 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, you'll know that Israel began as a unified nation, but later was divided. And ultimately, that division was the northern and southern kingdom, Israel in the north and Judah in the south. And eventually, both of those kingdoms were conquered. They were conquered by the Babylonians. And one of the things I love to say when you read those texts, if you're a fan of Game of Thrones, you read those texts and it's like you're reading the Game of Thrones, because there's all these different, the Canaanites and the Babylonians and these tights and those tights and all these different communities, which are just like the houses in Game of Thrones. And of course, there were constant battles and kingdoms working with or working against each other. And so unfortunately, the kingdom of Israel went through a number of iterations. Again, first Israel, then 2 kingdoms, Israel and Judah, and ultimately conquered by the Babylonians. And the Hebrew people entered exile. And we read the echoes of that showed up in Scripture. So as the Hebrew people were in exile and were in lament and feeling and experiencing their own trauma, this is where we have the words from Psalm 137, by the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down, yea, we wept, when we remembered Zion, right? Zion being home, right? Zion being the old kingdom of Judah. Now, what's not immediately apparent, if you understand and know that there was an exile, is that there were many who were left behind. See, the people that were captured, and this tracks with how war happened at that time, the people that were captured were the leaders of Israel, the priests, the prophets, and members of the royal court. They were all taken into captivity, but farmers, laborers, and members of a distinct wisdom community were left behind. And this wisdom community is the community that the writer of Job belongs to. This community is also who the character of Job represents. There's another biblical scholar who writes about it this way, Tiffany Hoke Loomis. She writes about it this way: Job is a fictional character narrated within the post-exilic context of ancient Israel. So this character of Job, a fictional character, this story is being told after this exile in ancient Israel. She goes on and she contends that the character of Job represents a critique of the post-exilic Deuteronomy covenant theology of reward as a consequence of obedience to the covenant God and punishment as a result of disobedience to the covenant God, the theology that Job's friends vigorously defend. I want to make sure y'all caught that. Did you catch that? That what the book of Job is, take a breath, because if you've never heard this, this changes everything. The book of Job is a critique. That's why it was written. It's actually a radical revolutionary text. And it was written as a critique of this idea that God rewards you when you're obedient to it, and it punishes you when you're disobedient to it. As a people that was experiencing great suffering, we can only imagine the suffering that came out of the war that ultimately led to the conquering, and then you're left behind, and then you're being told that there's something wrong with you because you were left behind, and so God is punishing you. The book of Job was a writing as a critique of the God that we met in chapter 1 and 2. That God that I said sold Job out. That's why it was written that way, because the writer and the narrator wants to call that God out and essentially say that that God ain't God. Now, how do we know this? Because it's one thing to say it, but how do we know this? Well, there's a powerful clue that's hidden from us when we read the text in English. See, in the conversation between God and Satan, you may have noticed that I kept saying, and the Lord, ... I never used the word God because that's what's written in the text. But when you look at the Hebrew, the word that was translated into Lord is Yahweh. And the word that is translated into Satan is the accuser. And so Yahweh and the accuser are the ones having this conversation. Now remember, I just talked about the four sources, JEPD, Yahwist, Elohist, Priestly, and Deuteronomist. And so then we understand that the belief system, and it was the Yahwist belief system that believed in this idea that God rewards you when you're obedient and punishes you when you're disobedient. That's a Yahwist and a Deuteronomist way of thinking. And what the writer of this text is saying that, nah, that's all BS. That ain't God. That's not God. And he sets it up in such a way to have you experience an emotional reaction to it, because like I said, I was pissed off, and I'm sure y'all are pissed off. It's like, is this is God? This is how God operates? That you can be faithful and blameless and looking out for your kids and making sure they ain't sinning and burning sacrifices on their behalf. Then that God kills all of them, takes all of your wealth. And then, as I said earlier, it would be the equivalent of a cyber hack, and all of your bank accounts are just drained. And then on top of that, you're like, the Lord gives and the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. And then that dude doubles down and is like, okay, do everything short of taking his life. Torture him. And so we recognize that that is the character that we're meeting in the beginning of this text, Yahweh. And that is the character that's being called to task. And later, as Job talks about this idea of wanting to take God to court, that's the character that Job is going to take to court. And so in the subsequent chapters, one of the other clues that are available to us is that Job and his friends use a different name for God. From this point on, when we read the text, anytime we read the word God, the Hebrew that's being used is either El Shaddai, or El Eloah, not Yahweh. And why is that important? I said there were 4 schools: Yahwist, Elohist, Priestly, and Deuteronomist. Elohist is that wisdom community. And so that's why they would only use El Shaddai, or Eloah, or any forms of El to speak of God, right? Because that is God to them. Yahweh is not God to them, right? Very important, very important. And so this is our clue that the writer and the narrator are from the wisdom school of thought or community. And so biblical scholar Norman Habel writes this about this school: the wisdom school refers to an orientation that involves learning via critical observation and rational analysis rather than revelation from a deity or a traditional message from religious leaders. You hear me and PY say all the time, right? You got to investigate it for yourself. We can lead you, but ultimately you need to use your own good sense and your own good mind to rationally analyze it, not relying on some vision or revelation from on high, or just the word of a religious leader. This school of thought included close observation of both the natural world and human behavior. And this is something I just want to seed this now, because one of the things that's happening in the book of Job is understanding the wisdom of nature, is understanding the wisdom of the earth, is understanding the wisdom of the natural world. And we're going to tap into that, because that's what gets us into understanding the truth of God. Wisdom thinking was akin to what we would today call scientific analysis. The wise were the scientists of old, and the subject of their analysis was understood as both a mystery and a reality. So that means they were able to hold both ideas of the divine, the mysterious, and yet a divine realization, a divine reality. So this community that the character Job represents felt lost and were traumatized by the events that had taken place in their homeland. In the midst of this, they are being told that they must have done something wrong for this to have happened to them. In the midst of this, they are being told that they have not been obedient to God, and this is the only logical and reasonable reason for their suffering. In the midst of this, the prophet Jeremiah calls the leaders that were taken into exile, quote, good figs, unquote, and those left behind, bad figs, quote unquote. This is the supposedly great prophetic vision from God. If you read Jeremiah 24, this is why we got to be careful when we just out here reciting text or just reading text without context. Because when we understand this context, then we understand that Jeremiah was having a vision from his privilege. Lord have mercy. His mind wasn't on the least of these, because he believed that God is a God that rewards us when we're pious and punishes those who are unsavory or not good. And so we have this sweeping text, this vision of the figs. Those that obey God are the good figs, and those that supposedly disobey God are the bad figs. And so that's what this community was being told that they were. And so finally, the writer of Job is very savvy, because the story of the innocent sufferer was not a new story. It was an ancient tale that was known and told for generations. What the writer does is use his training and learning from the wisdom school and takes this familiar story to write a scathing critique and expose the flawed concept of God, of the God of those who celebrated themselves as being chosen by this God. And so cleverly, each of Job's friends then represent 3 different yet all problematic concepts of God. Again, the biblical scholar Norman Habel writes this: the narrator of Job is much more than a narrator of an oral tradition or a literary artist. He is a creative historian, an empathetic member of this local community, an ardent wisdom advocate, and a radical theologian. Now, I got to get back to something, because I told you I was going to talk about it, and it makes me mad. I want to get back to the conversation with Job's wife. Now, as I already stated, and this is something problematic that we find throughout the text, far too many women are unnamed in the text. But yet, the Bible is being used in so many ways to make decisions about the lives of women, about the bodies of women, about the attributes of women, about the goodness or lack of women. And so I'm always concerned when I find and see yet again in the text another moment where they didn't even have enough respect for this beautiful soul to give us her name or give her a name. But what gets lost in the reading is that this woman is also experiencing unimaginable suffering. Because see, the story is written through the lens of Job. Job lost his children, all of his children died. But she's a mother. Those souls were conceived in her womb. She carried them and gave birth to them. And all of them are gone. But nobody's acknowledging her pain. Nobody's acknowledging her suffering. As they are a couple and they are in partnership, right? And of course, in a patriarchal society, as a woman, if your husband is dead or no longer has means, that also affects her adversely. So we have to understand first, just to appreciate for a second, and again, this is why we look at the text in this way. This woman was already traumatized. This woman was already grieving. This woman was already in a great amount of pain, something that she may never fully recover from. And so what gets lost is her pain. What gets lost is her trauma. And also what gets lost is her wisdom. Because understanding now that we're reading a critique of this covenant God, understanding that we're reading now a critique of a God that rewards you when you do his bidding and punishes you when you don't, but also just arbitrarily allows the accuser, allows this thing, Satan, to just afflict you within the inch of your life, we can hear her words differently. Because see, I see this woman and I get tickled because she had already made a decision in her mind. She had already made a determination in her mind that if that's God, I don't want no part of it. She had made a decision. She realized after losing my children and all of our wealth for no reason, after being blameless, and that's enough for me to be done with this God. That you could do everything right. You can dot every I and cross every T, and this God will be like, yeah, Satan, go do whatever you want to that person and their family by proxy. Instead, most people have walked away from that scene with gross interpretations about women. We have that line where he's like, woman, you sound foolish. I'm thinking about, there's the gospel song, and I'm not sure many of you know it, Work It Out. Right? Great gospel song from Charles G. Hayes and the Cosmopolitan Choir in Chicago. Right? And it's one of a great gospel song and one of the great ad libs of all time, right? Where the lead singer is, she goes to the story of Job, talking about Job's suffering, and the idea is that Jesus will work it out, that you can go through all this suffering, but Jesus will work it out if you let him. And so, Job looked at the woman, looked up at the sky, said, woman, you sound foolish, right? And this is understanding how this has just been embedded in our psyche, this idea that a woman doesn't understand important matters, right? It puts these things in the psyche even now as we are seeking to elect our first woman president. There's still these ideas, oh, well, women can't lead, or women are too emotional. And it's rooted right here in this text, this foolishness, this mess. And instead of understanding her wisdom, that actually she was seeing something very clear. She was already rejecting that God concept. And she was like, Job, when you going, really? Really, Job? You better let go of that God. That's what she was saying. Finally, within that, all of Job's responses to his wife, but also his response, the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away, blessed be the name of the Lord. Naked I came into this world, naked I will leave, all of that stuff. We can now understand, and we must read his words as trauma responses. given all that he's experienced. We see it all the time. Pastor Yolanda and I, as we are working with folks and counseling folks, and you're experiencing something traumatic, and like immediately you're trying to new thought yourself out of the ditch, right, out of the experience. And you know, one of the things about CSC, right, we say CSC, our mission and purpose is to embody unconditional love. We do our very best to have a trauma-informed response. So first, let's step back. No, we're not talking about A Course in Miracles or Ernest Holmes or what affirmation to use. The first thing is to respond in love. And so Job was traumatized, and unfortunately, that's what he did. He went to what he had been taught he was supposed to say, what he was taught he was supposed to think. And so what we begin to understand with Job's trauma as we meet him and hear his words in the subsequent chapters is he's starting to voice the truth of his trauma. What we're starting to read in the subsequent chapters as he experiences suicidal ideation, as he wished he was never even born, as he even writes in the text he wished he had been aborted rather than experience what he's experiencing right now. And then we find that his so-called friends were simply saying, Job, you must have done something wrong. Repent. Sacrifice, change, tell God, I'm sorry, right? All of this kind of stuff. And what we're going to unpack in the coming weeks is how that same type of thinking exists in our world today and even exists in our New Thought metaphysical communities. I can't say that enough because this is not an anti-Christian or a critique on Christianity. Right? It's really a critique on the ways in which humans try to spiritualize things that shouldn't be spiritualized. And we're only scratching the surface of this text. And again, as we move through the month, we will go deeper and deeper. But what we have already uncovered, I believe, has already changed your perspective. What we have already uncovered is already starting to pull at old threads, even in your life, that may need to be healed. What we have already uncovered is setting you on a path to find divine reality, just as Job does, to see God and live. The God of the opening of this story is a caricature and is comical. The God of the opening of this story cannot be the love that we know God is. The God of the opening of this story is, in fact, not God. And that is what the writer of this story is taking us on the journey to discover, and that is what Job will discover. As Hable writes, and I quote, "The ultimate goal is to discern a deeper dimension of spiritual reality, the wisdom innate in the depths of the cosmos." And so then we begin to see that Job is really an esoteric text. We find that the wisdom in Job aligns with so many other spiritual traditions that bring us to this grand reality of understanding who and what God is. But first, we got to reject this old God that rewards and punishes. And many times it's in our suffering that we finally come to that. It's like, wait, no, this can't be right. How in the world could we think that God just allowed and caused a hurricane to have folks without homes and without power and without their livelihood? It doesn't add up. But again, see, the wisdom community is using their intellectual prowess, their rationality, their sense of reasoning. And we bring that all to the table. And we should always bring that to our spiritual traditions. Now, next week, we're going to talk about what Job represents and what Job's innocence and suffering represents. And this is one of the things I say when we think about what's happening in our world today. Anyone who has experienced the effects of a hurricane is an innocent sufferer, like Job. All of the victims at the hands of Diddy, they're like Job, innocent sufferers. Immigrants that are being vilified and disparaged right now in our election season are like Job, innocent sufferers. And many of you are just like Job, innocent sufferers. It's so incredibly unfortunate, that about a week before he was indicted, our mayor had the nerve to compare himself to Job. But we understand something specific about Job now. We understand that Job represents a community in great trauma, a community that had experienced unimaginable suffering, and a community that was being told, because of your suffering, this was at the hands of God because you must have done something wrong. The same way that our LGBTQ brothers and sisters are talked about to this day, but specifically I'm thinking about at the height of the so-called AIDS crisis and epidemic here in this country. That's what so many beautiful souls were told. That's what, oh Lord, it brings tears to my eyes. That's what so many souls died believing. And so we're gonna deal with that. The innocent sufferer. Because when we center that as we read this story, it will cause us to show up differently. As we center that as we read this story, we will know that there's nothing wrong with us. There's not something outside of us punishing us or rewarding us. And we can meet God within our very own selves. For this truth, I am so very grateful. I say amen, ashe, and so it is. So it is.
Now you know why I have been asking him to do a series on Job, the book of Job, the story of Job, the falsehoods that we've all internalized and accept, the trauma that we've all rationalized and weaponized, used this book to weaponize, to feel that we couldn't acknowledge our suffering and have compassion for our suffering and the suffering of others. It does bring tears, right? Because it's one of the reasons why we even wanted to create CSC, is so that we could support people and letting go of these stories, these beliefs that cause us to suffer even more on top of our own suffering. And so I hope that you go back and watch this message again. There's so much good here. There's so much love in what was created for you here. And I feel that there's been a lifting of something for a lot of us who've experienced trauma and have had to try to justify it and have had this book used to weaponize it against us. That ain't God.
That ain't God.
And so I hope that this has met you where you are today, where you've been in your lives today. Share it with other people who keep re-traumatizing themselves by believing these stories inaccurately.
Absolutely.
Thank you, PG.
Thank you. Thank you. And so in this moment, it is time for giving. You've seen the information throughout the stream. You see it here now on the screen. You can go to our website, celebrationsc.org/give, or you can text your dollar amount to 347-744-9500. If you use text to give, there is a $10 minimum to text to give. Of course, we always appreciate your gifts. It continues to support CSC and being all that it is to so many around the world, and continuing to do what we do and bring what we bring. And of course, we know that giving is a spiritual practice. As you give, you receive. As I love to say, it's like breathing, right? You exhale so that you could inhale, and that's what giving is all about. And when you start to understand that, then you experience the blessing of giving. You start to experience the prosperity that comes from being a giver. And I love to quote my mom, if you always give, you will always have. And so from that place of awareness, we affirm right here and now, all the money that I circulate
All the money that I circulate
returns to me multiplied
returns to me multiplied
in a never-ending cycle
in a never-ending cycle
of increase
increase
and enjoyment.
and enjoyment.
To that we say amen,
Amen.
ashe,
Ashe.
and so it is.
And so it is.
Well, I love and appreciate you all. I'm looking at the time. I'm not sure how long this series will go. I think we're probably going to go into next month because there's so many wonderful things that I really want to make sure that we take in. But we're going to continue through this month. I love and appreciate you all. We love and appreciate you all.
Yes.
Have an amazing rest of your day. Have an amazing Sunday. Start writing down your questions, particularly if you decide to go back and reread the text. The God Talk is on the third Sunday, on the 20th, right? So you can bring your questions to the God Talk. We look forward to you joining us on Wednesday morning for the Momentum Prayer Call. And then we'll be back together again next Sunday as we continue in this series. We love you. Bye for now.
Bye for now.